just a quick introduction and run of show. My name is Ben Hart. I'm the Deputy Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development. It's my pleasure to be able to welcome people here today on behalf of UPS and Boeing and their United Global partners and teams. It really is a village that has made today possible, and we did want to recognize those who are not only speaking to us today, but a couple of very important guests that are with us as well. Yes? Is that okay? Should we go there? All right. So a few folks that are here with us today from these respective companies. First, from Atlas Air, who is Boeing's partner on these types of projects, and they operate the heavy machinery, mainly the Dreamlifter. John Wilder, who's with us. Thank you, John, for being here with us. And also a couple of longtime UPS employees that represent the heart and the goodness of this company. And so with us we have a 30-year safe driver, 30 years on the job and recognized as a safe driver within UPS, Chris Meekum. And also in management here, Maisie Brown, one of the UPS drivers as well. So thank you for being with us. We're honored to be here at this facility today. Obviously, shutting down operations and allowing us to bring in one of the world's premier aerospace vehicles is not an easy thing to do. I'm going to take off my mask, and I'm losing this camera. I think it's channel 2. I'm losing that camera a little bit, just so you know. But it's obviously not an easy thing to do to shut down your operations and welcome in a aerospace plane like this. So this really is incredible. The Dreamlifter has never been to the state of Utah before. We're honored to welcome it here, and it really is a lot of people working to make this happen. I do also want to announce those who you'll be hearing from today. We have a few different people that I want to recognize. We'll first have a chance to hear from Governor Gary Herbert. We'll then have a chance to hear... Go ahead. There we go. Do you want me to lay it? There you go. There we go. All right, so we will hear first from Governor Herbert. We'll also have a chance to hear from Ted Kersey, who is in leadership here at Boeing Salt Lake City. We'll have a chance to hear from Superintendent Dixon. I think the meaning and the purpose of why you'll hear from these different people will become evident as the governor's talking. And you'll also have a chance to hear from Teresa Mbaku with the Salt Lake City School District, and we appreciate her for being with us today. I also want to recognize Davis Smith from Cotopaxi, who obviously one of the companies supplying these masks. And I want to recognize somebody else. It's always a little bit dangerous to do this, but I don't know. I've only talked with Hayden Bryant on the phone. Hayden, could you come up here as well? Thank you. And so I want to invite Hayden Bryant to come up and join us as well. And so Hayden Bryant with HM Cole and the awesome work that they've been doing. I'm just going to say this, Hayden's bailed me out on a couple of times as we've been working with this Mask Forever Utah. If you just want to come down and stand by Ted Kersey right there, that would be awesome. So Hayden and I have done a lot of work over the phone, and so we're grateful for him being with us here today as well, and HM Cole for their amazing work on this partnership. So we'll first hear from the governor. Before the governor comes up, I just want to say a personal thank you. This has been a lot of work. Thank you to the Boeing company. Thank you to UPS. The last 3 months have been really interesting, and I think when someone gets a swab shoved up their nose, they might take that for granted a little bit, or when someone's able to put a face mask on, they don't know where it comes from. And a lot of these masks, people have stepped up in the state of Utah. We're even making swabs here in the state of Utah, but we're also dependent on an international supply chain. And so we've been able to bring in some of the masks for a Mask Forever Utah program from various locations all over the world. But the story within a story here is the logistics. How do you get this stuff out of places and here to Utah? We can't always do it on the Dreamlifter. And so I think it's important that we take a moment and recognize all those who really work to get this stuff, the healthcare equipment, supplies that we need to really be effective against our battle against the coronavirus. So for Brown, for all those logistics providers, for all those who work on these type of efforts to ensure that our state has what it needs, thank you. And it's really a recognition of your incredible work. So we'll now go ahead. We'll first hear again from Governor Herbert. We'll then hear from Ted Kersey, We will then hear from Superintendent Sid Dixon. And lastly, we will hear from Teresa Mbaku. I'll get up, and then we will have a chance for Q&A from the media at that point. Governor Herbert.
Well, thank you, Ben. Let me just add my thanks to everybody who's made this happen. This is not an easy logistical thing to coordinate, and we appreciate all those who've made it possible. This is quite a sight here to see this very, very large plane delivering some very, very important personal protection equipment we're going to be able to use as we adjust and deal with the pandemic that we have here with us today. So we can't say thanks enough, particularly the private sector, which is stepping up and helping out so much to us in government to do the right thing. Certainly Boeing, UPS, Atlas Air, Flexport, HM Cole, Cotopaxi, and you will hear from our education folks a little bit, because this is really important to help them as we open up our schools here on time, our public education system. And these face masks are going to help them to have that to happen. Let me just remind everybody, this really hit Utah, the pandemic, really the first part of March. It's been really just a little over 3.5 months since we got engaged in this pandemic and this fight to see what can we do to slow the spread, stop the spread, keep people's health and welfare protected, as well as not have a tank of the economy. That's not been an easy thing to do. It's a balancing act, it's a threading of the needle, but we've done a pretty good job. It seems like, though, 3.5 months, it seems like 3.5 years. This has been a hard, challenging time for us in this state, for our country, and it's not unique to Utah. Other states are having the same challenge, if not even more so. So, again, what we have here today, I think, is a very significant occasion as we have this shipment of personal protective equipment arriving with the help of many. Before I talk about face masks, which is a topic of conversation for us in this state right now, let me just make one brief comment about the fire season that we're in right now. We've had 4 major fires this past weekend, one on Traverse Ridge, one out at Saratoga Springs, one down by Oak City in Millard County, and one down in Kane County. We've had to evacuate, over 300 homes because of the threat of fire. Fortunately, we've had minimal destruction because of the work of many, our firefighters, the cooperation of the public. But it just is a reminder for us that we are in a very difficult season here where it's dry. We haven't had much rain this spring and summer, and so we have tinder-like conditions. So I want to remind all Utahns to be extra careful about what they do outdoors. I know it's fireworks season. Fireworks are a part of our celebration for the 4th of July and the 24th of July. Just a reminder that there's a certain window, period of time where you can actually set off fireworks, July 2nd through July 5th, July 22nd through July 25th. No other time are they legal. So we would encourage you to make sure you have legal fireworks, make sure you do that in a designated location, which typically is identified by the local government, your city mayors, your county commissioners. Again, many cities will have a designated spot, maybe a shopping center parking lot or a grocery store parking lot, where you can go at a certain time and set off your fireworks till your heart's content. But otherwise, you need to be very careful. There really is no place on public lands where it's legal to set off fireworks, whether they be federal lands or whether they be state lands. You can only have campfires in designated campfire locations. So again, we would encourage all of us to be extra careful at this difficult time with the drought and with the tinder-like conditions to protect our properties and our lives. So again, a word to the wise, we would appreciate people to pay attention to that. Now, let me just talk about the pandemic for just a minute, because that's really what the focus here today is. I think it's hard to overstate, and more people are coming to the realization that the single easiest, most effective thing we can do to slow and stop the spread of the COVID-19 is to wear masks like all of you are doing. It's a way of showing respect for those you associate with. This is not about me, me, me. This is about our neighbors. And if we truly want to show love and consideration and respect for our neighbors, wear the mask. Certainly if you can't, social distance. Again, being outdoors and social distancing is okay, but when you can't do that, you should be wearing a face mask. It's a tangible way of showing that we truly do care about our neighbors. I talked to the Vice President here just 2 days ago, and again, he had, in our conversation, talked about the importance of all of us following the local guidelines, respecting the regional differences we have throughout this country. Certainly we do that here in Utah. The rural areas are different than the urban areas and in between. But an opportunity for us, again, to work together for the good of the whole is to wear a mask, and the Vice President indicated to me we're going to make sure that that's the message that he and the President send out across the country going forward. We announced on April 28th, some of you can remember, what we call the Mask for Every Utah program. Mask for Every Utahn program, and with the help of the Lieutenant Governor, we're providing free masks for anybody who wants one. We've had over 272,000 orders. We've delivered over 1.1 million masks of these orders. Particularly, we're concerned about those who are vulnerable in our population, over 65 years of age, those that have underlying health conditions, obesity, lung problems, autoimmune systems, diabetic, all those things that make them more susceptible, and the COVID-19 reacts to them a little more severe in their health care. So again, we want to make sure we take extra caution with them. These masks will help those vulnerable populations in particular. In addition, we have over 70,000 masks directly to nonprofit and community organizations that serve these vulnerable populations. Again, our long-term care centers, those that are being helped in their senior years. Again, we're delivering masks to them to make sure that these vulnerable populations are taken care of. We're working with grocery stores, retail outlets. Our business community is stepping up and saying we want to make sure that we do our part in two areas. One, to make sure that their employees come and work in a safe environment, and two, that their customers shop in a safe environment. They're doing better to make sure that their employees have masks, that they have sanitation capability there, washing hands, hand sanitizer, screening when employees come to work to make sure that they're sick, if they have a fever, that they're excused to go home until they are better. That's an important aspect. We're going to do the same thing. Again, we want to ensure consumer confidence that where they go and shop, that it's a safe place for them to be, and our business community is stepping up and taking what they call the pledge to make sure that they have a safe environment for their employees, and for their customers. We need to do even more if we're going to slow this down. We're concerned about some of the rising infection rates that we see here in the last couple of weeks, and turn the tide on that infection rate and bend the curve again as we did in the beginning. Again, we need even more masks, particularly for our children. And so I want to give a special shout out and a huge thank you to HM Cole and its founder Hayden Bryant for working with the state to secure masks that are small enough for our young people to wear and utilize comfortably. Again, as we go back to school, that's going to be a need. We're going to have about 300,000 more masks to add to our 2 million that we've got now in place that have already been procured. I want to again give a special acknowledgement to Todd Bingham and his team at the Utah Manufacturers Association, who's worked with more than 20 different manufacturers, in fact, to help secure more masks for the people of Utah to utilize. Again, they're a big part of what we're going to be talking about to open up our public education. One of the most common questions I get as I get around the state is the public education system going to open up? We certainly plan on it happening, and Sid Dixon, our superintendent, will talk about that here in a few minutes in more detail about the plan that we have to open up our public education and our schools as per usual, with some modifications to again create a safe environment in our education system. With that, let me just finish by saying again, we appreciate the work of Cotopaxi. You know, the shipping lines to be able to access some of the personal protective equipment and other things that we needed to prepare ourselves were really not available. And those consumer lines, those acquisition lines, commercial shipping options really have been closed down in a significant way, making it more difficult for Utah and other states to acquire product. So we appreciate the fact that Cotopaxi has stepped up and helped us access in foreign areas the equipment and personal protection gear that we needed. We want to thank Boeing in particular, that great corporate citizen. The largest exporter, by the way, of products in our country is Boeing, and we appreciate their footprint here in Utah. They've been great corporate citizens. This is just an example of this big plane here that they've loaned to us to help us deliver some of this equipment that we need. And again, Boeing, which is state-of-the-art in everything they do, we appreciate their work. We'll be indebted to Boeing for their generosity in helping us bring these protective gear to our state. A little noisy here, isn't it, the airport? Also, I want to, in addition to Boeing, I want to thank again particularly UPS. We're here at their facilities. They're helping us to acquire and distribute this around the state, and really this is an opportunity that we've had the Blue and Brown have helped deliver in a huge way for Utah. So this may be one of the most difficult logistical efforts maybe in our state's history, to bring product here from foreign lands, the difficulty of the pandemic worldwide, having it distributed to the people of Utah, doing most of it free of charge to the consumer, and trying to get everybody on the same page when it comes to following protocols that allow us to slow down the spread, hopefully stop the spread of the COVID-19, protect the lives of the people we represent here in the state, of our 3.2 million people, respecting the regional differences. And we've done a pretty good job. We have some red flags out there that we're concerned about, but today I'll just emphasize the mortality rate in Utah is less than 1%. That's the lowest in the nation. Our unemployment rate right now today is 8.5%, the second lowest in the nation. So as we try to balance public safety and health and welfare, along with making sure our economy continues to function, which is an important part of our protecting our livelihoods and having people, in fact, feel secure in their opportunities as individuals, as families, we found, I think, a good place that we've balanced. We still have a lot of work to do. It's not time to spike the football, but I appreciate the cooperation of everybody, including the great citizens of this great state, following good recommendations and best practices, including wearing the mask when you can't social distance. So with that, again, I'm honored to be here today on what is, I think, a very significant occasion, and thank all those who made it possible. Thank you very much. Ted?
Wow, what an awesome event. Seeing the number of organizations, companies come together to make this happen is just awesome and amazing. Good morning. I'm proud to be here today to mark this special occasion, which is part of a larger Boeing global effort to fight the spread of COVID-19. To date, we've helped deliver more than 4 million units of PPE and have delivered 3D printed more than 39,000 face shields for those in need. A little history on Utah and Boeing's partnership. Boeing's history in Utah dates back to 1927, when Salt Lake City was a stopover for flights between Chicago and San Francisco. Since then, we've worked together to achieve remarkable things. Locally, Utahns assemble, fabricate, and integrate components for Boeing commercial jets, such as the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and others. On Hill Air Force Base, we continue our 60-year partnership with airmen, keeping the Minuteman ICBM and other systems ready to defend our nation. I'd like to take a moment to thank the following individuals and organizations. Governor Herbert for your leadership, Ben Hart and your staff, UPS for hosting us on the ramp today, our great partners Cotopaxi, Flexport, and Atlas Air, who helped us make this event possible. State Representative Adam Robertson, co-founder of Fordham Technologies, a Boeing Horizon X company, here today. And finally, the crew members of the Boeing Dreamlifter. Boeing's committed to the health and safety of the Beehive State, and we couldn't be happier to deliver this shipment of masks to Utah students and teachers in support of that commitment. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm Sydney Dixon, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, and with me on the podium I have Tayson, Joanna, and Tommy, and I really so appreciate everything that's going on today on behalf of these students. They represent almost 670,000 students in Utah in public education. We are so grateful to the partners who made this happen. I want to give a shout out to several of them. First of all, Cotopaxi for having the vision as part of their overall mission to give back to public education and to the community, and to put this Herculean effort together to create the masks. I want to thank Boeing for all of the logistics in getting the masks here, and you heard all of the partners mentioned. Boeing is a great partner to public education, in that it's not just about the masks, but they continue to provide opportunities for our students to be a part of their company and to gain skills so that they can grow their own by engaging with our students. So I really appreciate their ongoing support, and also to HM Cole for helping prepare the masks. And a special shout out to our Energizer Bunny of GoEd, Ben Hart, who I don't know how he pulls off what he does, but in the middle of the night in clandestine operations to get a lot of the protective equipment that we need, and especially putting all of this together along with Kimberly Carlisle and his team at GoEd. So thank you so much to those three key partners in making this happen. We want these students to be able to go back to school in the fall. It's key. It's so important for their academic well-being, their mental health, and their growth overall, and we want them to be able to do so in a safe and healthy manner. The State Board of Education has put together a framework and a plan with requirements and recommendations, and each of our schools will be submitting, each of our districts and our charter schools will be submitting plans by August 1st. Those plans will include ways to think about movement in our schools, proximity, respiratory output, and masks are an important part of that for the adults in our building and for our students. And we appreciate the ability from an equity standpoint that every student and our teachers, our adults in the building, can have access to a mask thanks to this effort. So I applaud everybody who's been a part of this. I want to thank you so much for your efforts. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Teresa Mbaku, Career and Technical Education Director for the Salt Lake City School District. On behalf of our former superintendent, Dr. Lexi Cunningham, and our new interim superintendent, Mr. Larry Madden, we would like to thank you for supporting the students, the teachers, the administrators, and the support personnel in our district and school districts across the state. Our primary interest as educators is to help students develop the skills and competencies that they need in order to function as productive adults. As educators, we face a lot of challenges as we seek to provide students with effective learning and training opportunities. COVID-19 has only exacerbated this particular challenge. In these difficult times, We must keep our young people safe and healthy so they can concentrate on their studies. We believe that this very generous donation of masks will go a long way to keeping our students safe and allowing them to learn. On behalf of myself and my colleagues in education across the state of Utah and economic development, I would like to thank Boeing, Cotopaxi, and HM Cole for their generosity and kindness. History will remember you well. I would also like to thank our great governor, Mr. Gary Herbert, for his leadership, particularly his dedication to education and the development of a new crop of leaders for our great state. And finally, a thank you to the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Ben Hart and Kimberly Carlisle, for your leadership. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you to those that we've heard from. Let me provide just a few more remarks before we go to question and answer and just provide some context. So when we got into the Mask for Every Utahn program, we recognized that 2.3 million masks was going to go a long ways. We also recognized getting a third of the state's citizens an order of masks is not an easy effort. So as we started into this, we realized we were going to have a lot of extra masks, and so that's when we reached out to Superintendent Dixon, who is amazing. She just finished her 4th year at the helm of the State Board of Education, and talk about someone who loves the students of this state and just makes things happen. So from there, it was easy to work with. We just had one problem. We had some of the masks that were on site, the HM Cole masks. We had some of the masks that were not on site, and when we were talking, and specifically these masks from Cotopaxi, these are wonderful masks. In fact, the masks that the students get are actually the ones that I'm wearing today. So these are the gray masks. They're incredibly comfortable. The smaller, younger students will also get a chance to get a mask that fits their face just a little bit more effectively in terms of being able to prevent any spread of coronavirus. And so we had those, but we knew that it was going to take a long time to get this stuff into the state of Utah for distribution, and we know that school is getting ready to start. We're at July 1st already, and so we had a predicament. We had the extra masks, but we didn't have them in the state of Utah, and that's when we made the call to Boeing, and we asked them if they would mind picking up some cargo for us, because we didn't know how long, and we couldn't find anything commercially that was going to get it to us on time. And as some of you may have heard, this was actually the second time we called Boeing. We had called them before, and they had very graciously gone through all of the effort of getting everything ready. We had a flight scheduled, and then again, to show the fierceness of the battle for personal protective equipment in China, where we were supposed to pick the cargo up, it was sold out from underneath us. And so Boeing was ready to go, but the cargo was actually sold, even though we had already procured it. So we were in a difficult spot, but again, we had an opportunity, so we called Boeing again, and very graciously again, no complaining, they were there every step of the way with us. Mike Castle, Todd Pauley, the entire team at Boeing, Mike Walker, and their partners at Atlas stepped up in a major way. Cotopaxi and their freight forwarder Flexport did an amazing job helping get through customs. Our local Salt Lake City Customs office here bent over backwards to accommodate us as well. And so there's a lot that goes into a logistical effort like this. I also want to acknowledge that we couldn't do any of this without the support of the Utah State Legislature. So Representative Robertson and also Senator Milner, who's here with us today, thank you so much for your support of these efforts. The funding that came from the legislature was critical. I also want to acknowledge our federal partners. We have several people from federal offices in our congressional district, our delegation that are here today as well. Thank you. The CARES Act provided all of the funding for these masks. Boeing made the delivery free of charge. UPS is letting us borrow their ramp today, so thank you to them. But it really, because of the Federal CARES Act, we were able to make a lot of this stuff happen. So thank you to our federal delegation for their work as well in keeping this country safe. And so I also just want to acknowledge a few of my colleagues, my boss, Val Hale, who does an amazing job running the Governor's Office of Economic Development. It's been an honor and a privilege for me to work for him for the past 5 years. The opportunity of a lifetime. And I also want to recognize Derek Miller, the head of the Salt Lake Chamber, and Teresa Foxley, the head of the Economic Development Corporation of Utah, who are here with us today. And State Mail, Andy Wright, Scott Sutherland, they're overseeing the logistical mass of getting, you know, a third of the state citizens these masks. I won't spend time thanking everyone, but Larry Shepard as well, who's been playing customer service for the past few weeks on this project. This has been a tremendous effort, and it's just one aspect of the entire state's comprehensive plan to address this pandemic. And I hope that today you've been able to just see a little bit more closely all the work that goes into that. So we'll now move to question and answers. If there's questions from the media related to the operation, I'll go ahead and field those. But also Superintendent Dixon and Governor Herbert are prepared to take answers as well. We'll just do 3 or 4 questions in the interest of time, if that's okay. If there's none, that makes it easier. Ben, yes, please. Grand Canada's request for a face mask.
Well, thank you, Ben. Let me just, before I answer that question, Ben, just to say, without putting too fine a point on it, I appreciate the fact that Ben talked about the team effort. If we're going to succeed in Utah, it really is going to be the collaborative spirit that we uniquely have here in Utah, working together, taking on individual responsibility, a spirit of working together. And again, this is an example of that happening here today. And it represents really 2 things as I was standing there thinking. One, it represents our efforts in a rational way to slow and stop the spread of the coronavirus. And all of us working together to do that very thing. Secondly, I know we see these planes taking off, and a little noisy here at the airport, which we probably understand, but that's the sound of commerce. I appreciate the fact that planes are taking off and landing here as we see our economics opportunities expand now from where they've been in the past. I hope we have more planes. I want you to know those who have been flying lately have reported back to me there's never been a safer, better time to fly than today. The planes are wiped down. They, in fact, are fogged so that any virus that may be there, you're asked to wear a mask. They're taking extra precautions to make sure that you can travel safely. And so I appreciate the work of our airlines, and I want to put a shout out to them as they're trying to help us get through this pandemic and open up the economy. That sound you hear is the sound of commerce now opening up in our state and around the country. The question from Ben is, we have another county that's asked us if they can be allowed to make it mandatory to wear a mask in their county. That's Grand County down Moab Way. We've granted that permission to Summit County and Salt Lake County. That is the process. The ability for local governments to say what is best for our region of our state. They know best what the impacts of this coronavirus are on their local community, and probably what needs to be done to help stop the spread. They then work with their local health departments. That works with the state health department. As we analyze the facts, then we make a decision. We just have heard about this request from Grand County. They will go through the process now with their local health department, interfacing with our state health department. We'll meet in the next couple of days, and then we'll make a decision. Again, if the data warrants the request, they'll be granted the request, but I don't want to presuppose it. We'll go through the process, and we'll decide in the next couple of days whether Grand County will be allowed to make it mandatory in Grand County in public areas where you can't social distance to wear the mask.
Yes.
Yes, what?
172 yes. He's wondering if you spoke with any of the families, if they have any advice about this.
I have not personally spoken to all the families. We have some of our health department people have spoken to the families. A lot of them have been in long-term care facilities and other situations, been in the hospital, etc. Again, one death is one too many. I hate to talk about the fact we have the lowest mortality rate in the nation. You know, one death is one too many, and we feel bad, and our hearts break for those who have been caught the COVID-19, and maybe that's hastened their death. or cause their death outright. That being said, we need to do what we can to work together and see what we can do to stop the spread. We know that the vulnerable populations are much more susceptible and have a longer and more severe reaction to the COVID-19 than some of our younger people. But even the infection rate seems to be moving down just a little bit. We expected when we opened up the economy and had less restrictions that there would be more interaction with people, and that would in fact spike our infection rates. That was just kind of a normal thing. We're doing more testing, which also is a factor, but not the factor. And so again, we just need to make sure that people understand we are not back to normal. We still have an emergency situation, and we need to be extra careful in how we conduct ourselves. Now that we're interfacing with more people like we're doing here today, we should have maybe more inclination to wear a mask to protect ourselves and to protect those around us. Unfortunately, some of us have got complacent and think, hey, we're back to the good old days, which we're not. And so that's why we're having the discussion now over mandatory mask use in some of the counties. And it's a legitimate question. Should the government use its heavy hand of influence, or should we use the more carrot approach as opposed to the stick to get people to do it? I would hope people would wear the mask and practice social distancing and the appropriate protocols on sanitation, not because government makes them do it, but because they do it because they love their neighbor, because they care about those that are around it, not only themselves, but their family, their loved ones, and even those that they don't maybe know, but are part of our community. And they do it because it's the right thing to do, and they want to, in fact, do the right thing. I think that's really the spirit of Utah, and I hope that, in fact, is what we will see resulting over the next 2 or 3 weeks. You know, I'm going to be meeting with our legislators next week to talk about where we're at, review the data, see what the data informs us as we look at best practices, what we should be doing and how we should do it. I think most rational people understand, you know, that we should in fact practice good protocols. I know the business community is stepping up. The healthcare associations and those involved in healthcare are concerned about overwhelming the healthcare system if we don't stem the rising tide. They're going to have their own, in fact, PSAs, public service announcements, to help inform people not only you should wear it, but why you should wear the mask, for example. Our private sector is stepping up, and our faith-based organizations have been very adamant about to the people and their flock and their followers to say, look, it's one thing to pray for a miracle, but it's another thing to pray for a miracle and not do anything about it. Faith without works is dead. And they're saying to all of us, pray like everything depends on Heavenly Father and our God, but then work like everything depends on us. It needs to be a combination of things, and I appreciate the faith-based organizations stepping up and making that as a consistent message around the state, Christian, non-Christian, collaborating on what we should be doing. So I feel very good about the direction we're going. We have some red flags, but we'll be meeting next week to see if we need to take any other actions. And by the way, I'll just remind everybody, we always talked about this being a balanced effort of protecting lives, health and welfare, as well as livelihoods. We see by polling, more people are concerned about their jobs now than they are in the health issue. It's really kind of a 50-50 split, so we're trying to find that balance point. We've always said we were going to do that, and we've pretty well struck a good balance. And last but not least, we've talked in terms of regional differences. There are some places in the state of Utah which are, in fact, by data, green, and we've allowed them to go to green. We still want them to be careful, and they ought to be rational about how they interface with people, particularly if they get outside of their counties in not green counties, but then going into yellow counties. We still have Salt Lake City, our capital city, it's still orange. So again, we respect regional differences. We're trying to allow for that and not have a one-size-fits-all approach.
One more question if there are no others. So very good question. The question was, how will distribution of these masks work? So and I also failed to recognize Chairman Mark Huntsman from the State School Board. I just want to recognize him as a special guest here today as well. So the distribution will work through the school districts. We're going to work with the State Board of Education. The state will hold the masks until the school districts tell us they're ready for them, and then we'll just distribute them out as is needed. But we want to have the opportunity. We know, whatever the local jurisdiction and the local regulations are, what they are, but we just want to make these masks available so that students can wear them as is needed. The other masks, so not related to those going to the students, because we have about 2.3 million that we've purchased, is the state. The other masks have been mailed off in orders of 4 and 5 and 6, again, to about a third of the households all across the state. So our state mail office, Andy Wright and Scott Sutherland, they've been overseeing volunteers, National Guard, missionaries, just about everybody who can lend a hand to come out and help fill these orders. And so we've been fulfilling those orders one off. And then very important, if there are nonprofit or community organizations, we've been fulfilling directly to them. So we've had some that have even requested 1,000 masks or 2,000 masks for veterans or for those who are vulnerable in some way, shape, or form as defined. And so we've just been working with everyone as these orders have been coming in to get them distributed. So we do want to say a huge thank you. In respect of UPS and their hospitality, they've shut down their operation basically to accommodate this. So we want to be very respectful to their time, but we do want to allow everyone to get a chance to at least see the plane, from a distance, a safe distance. But we also recognize that they have an operation here that they need to get started again, bring in some other planes. So with that, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you everyone who helped make today possible. We really appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you.